26, 2022. The first order of business is call to order. Don Michaelman,
I have a point of order
go ahead.
I'd like to make. Tammy, you recently informed me that the meetings that we conduct here, like all other city committee meetings, fall under the rules of Robert's Rules of Order. And I reviewed Robert's Rules of Order, and they require that a presiding member call the meeting to order. And we don't have a presiding member.
At this
So-
time, we're fine right now. That's something that's going to be considered. Okay.
So under the Robert's Rules of Order, we don't have a presiding member. So I looked at what do you do in the absence of a presiding member? And if you don't have a presiding member and you don't have a secretary, then what happens is the committee is supposed to, under Rule 50 of the Robert's Rules of Order, elect a temporary presiding member to conduct the meeting. And so the only question I have right now, and I was hoping the legal department would have a representative here, is whether electing a temporary presiding member to merely conduct today's meeting is a violation of the open meeting law, or whether it's significantly related to conducting the meeting, that it would not be a violation of the open meeting law. And so none of our meetings have been in compliance with Robert's Rules of Order because we have not had a presiding member run us through the agenda. Maybe Mr. Mayor can give us some insight.
Well, I've thought about this issue myself, and I'm going to propose to the council that a chairman and a vice chairman be appointed to be presiding officer and a fill-in officer if that presiding officer is not available, because I think you're right. In order to have a well-functioning committee, and if Robert's rules are required to be followed, then that's essential that we do that both now and in the future meetings. Of course, I'm not an attorney, although I think I've watched every episode of Law and Order.
Stayed at a Holiday
I think
Inn.
you're probably in a good place to be able to appoint or vote in a temporary presiding officer as you proceed.
Ralph, would you like to make that a motion?
Yeah, I'll move to elect Don Michaelman and Rod Moyer as co-presiding.
We'll have vice chair. So we just need a chair for today. That's all. Somebody to run the meeting.
Actually,
You're good with just a temporary presiding officer today.
Thank you.
Today only.
wait, it's only for, under Rule 50, it would only be for the conduct of this meeting.
Correct.
So we just
And-
need one person
And
to do
well,
that.
actually, we can do it any way we want, but
Second that for Don.
It's not a clear
What did I
motion.
do to you guys?
I mean, I don't want to belabor it, but I mean, we can do whatever we want under Rule 50 if we decide that it's significantly related to the conduct of this meeting, which I believe, I agree with the mayor, I think it is. So, all right, so you seconded, Don.
Did we have legal just walk in? Is that our legal?
Oh, there's our, yeah, very
I
good.
think we should get his opinion, please.
Good eye.
I will say that I heard the end of the conversation, and not all of it, but to the extent that what you said was under Rule 50, making a motion for a chair today, and that's the plan. I think that's a good plan, and that's appropriate and
Thank you.
allowable.
All right, thank you.
Are we actually operating under Robert's Rules of Order? And my question, and with the previous committee that was looking at the general plan, is that how they operated?
I'm George Worley. I'm the planning manager for the city and provided staff for both of the previous general plan reviews, so this is my third one here. The city operates under a modified version of Robert's Rules. We don't have the full book that we use. But the previous committees, we had one where there was a chair and vice chair appointed, and one where there were co-chairs appointed. Our recommendation from staff perspective is a chair and vice chair because the chain of command is more clear. But yeah, we've done this similarly in the past with a chair and vice chair.
I have the minutes from August 26, 2011, when we approved a chair and co-chair. So that's the way we operated back then.
And I know that the council policy calls for Robert's Rules of Order, and we have statutory provisions for the committees, both mayor ad hoc committees and standing committees. But the only thing that it says is that they will operate under parliamentary procedure. It's not specific.
And generally, Robert's Rules of Order are the baseline for parliamentary procedures in most parts of the United States.
Yeah, not my favorite, but that's what we're stuck with.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second.
Well, it needs to be amended. The motion needs to be amended. We're only talking one person. You talked
Okay,
about two.
well, I made the motion, and Rod tried to amend, or did amend it, and I accept the amendment to elect Don Michaelman as the temporary
Presiding officer.
presiding member for today's proceeding only.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We're just going to warm you up for tomorrow there, Don.
Don, your choice if you want to make Mr. McCarver move your
Okay, I've handed over.
Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. Tammy, would you call the roll?
Sure. Don Michaelman,
Here.
Ted Gambogi,
Here.
Andre Carmen,
Here.
Ralph Hess,
Here.
Jim Huffman,
Here.
Rod Moyer,
Here.
Terry Sapio,
Here.
Deborah Thalast, I'm sorry. Here. Thank you. Sorry about that. Gary Warub,
Here.
James McCarver,
Here.
and Mary Frederickson. Here. Thank you. We also have County Council Liaison Eric Moore, and we have Mayor Phil Good. I don't see Montoya here. Okay. And we have a quorum today.
So, Mr. Chairman, I would ask the mayor if he would readdress when you're talking, is that November 8th?
Yes, we'll have it on the November 8th agenda.
Then I would like to ask the committee, we've had all this time, I would like to see the next 3 months be opportunistic, and I would therefore like to ask if this committee would consider a meeting in November as well.
At this time, staff doesn't have everything in place for that. We will be ready in January for the next meeting.
Mr. Chair,
Deborah.
one of my concerns is I went back through the agenda that was presented to council in July, and there's a lot of deliverables that were due yesterday. And so I do support Mr. Warub's proposal to meet at least once during the remainder of the year, because I think by the time we get a chair, we need to talk about how we structurally want to handle the committee, for one thing, and I think we need to talk about the work plan, which we haven't done yet.
Yeah, if not November 8th, then sometime before the end of the year, I would agree with Deb.
George?
We have materials together that we can start the process with you. The first step that we're going to ask you to do is to begin review of the existing, the current general plan, element by element, review it, provide comments back, and then have discussions amongst yourselves about changes. We've talked a lot about going out to the public and getting input, but you can't just go out and ask them, what do you want? We have to have focused topics, and the way to do that is element by element focused topics.
I beg to differ, George. I'm going back again to April 26, 2011. Ryan Smith, who's no longer part of the city, said that it was the committee that would decide the nature and the content of the general plan.
It's the committee that assists in it.
No, this is the minutes from that
I
meeting.
understand, you're reading minutes.
These were approved.
You're reading minutes. That was the discussion that occurred at that committee meeting. The general plan is a document that belongs to the public of Prescott, not this committee and not the city council. You have to go out to the public and you have to get comments back, or you're going to have an issue meeting the state law requirements and getting this approved by the voters. This requires a voter approval. We went out to the public with both of the last general plan and the one before that and got overwhelming support in both cases because we went out to the public and asked their opinions and tailored the plan based on their positions. So we have to do that. It's vital for us to do that. This committee plays an important part, though, in helping focus what we ask from the public and reaching out to the public. We need to be able to reach out to the public and get comments back, and we have done that. We did it with the last plan, and we did it with the one before that. Public participation was a big deal. It occurred at different stages, sometimes early in the plan, sometimes later in the plan process. And the reason it did that was because we need to have something to ask the public. We need to have some basic information. And again, that's what we're going to ask you to do with your review of the document. Tell us what we need to ask the public. Make your comments and red lines and provide that information back. And then this committee will decide what questions do we ask? What topics do we need public input on? What things are clear? What things are already okay in the plan and can stay? And what things need to be changed because the times have changed significantly in the last few years. So again, we can get started on the review of elements part of this process. Very important that we hear from all of you on the existing elements and what needs to be addressed in them almost immediately. We could get that out to you even prior to a chair being selected so that you at least have something to start on. And then we'll see if we can get a meeting scheduled between now and the end of the year to begin that discussion, to set a pattern.
If we go through the presentation and what we're talking about today, it kind of spell all this out.
Yep, we do have it laid out in here. We can accelerate the timeline we're talking about. Are there any questions about any of that? Sorry,
Anything
I
else?
gave you a lecture. I didn't mean to.
Deborah?
Yeah, I just have one question. So the timeline, another hint again. The timeline that was given to the city council, which has a lot of things due by October, November, August, September, is this going to be updated for the council then?
We
Will
told
that
them,
also go on the 8th?
we told them that that was a fluid document, that we were going to try to stay on that as much as possible. We are a little behind on creating some stuff to get ready for that. So we are going to be working on that over the next couple of months, and we'll have everything hopefully up and running in January.
Thank you.
Okay. Tammy, do you want to go ahead and lead discussion?
First, we need approval of the September 28th, 2022 minutes.
Wasn't on the agenda, okay.
Yeah, it is.
No, I was just looking through my notes here.
I have one minor correction. Page 5 at the bottom, my last name's Huffman, not Hoffman.
Since we're on page 5, I have one other, it's more of a clarification. About the middle of the page, it says, Mr. Snyderman replied that the zoning map is binding and the general plan is a guide. So was he referring to the city's zoning map, or is he referring to the map that's part of the general plan?
The map that's part of the general plan.
Okay, thank you.
And as long as we're talking name corrections, just on page 1, my last name, Fred Durickson.
Okay, she'll make note of that.
Is there a motion to accept the minutes with?
So moved.
No, I haven't finished yet, Ted. With the amendments that were presented.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, please say aye and raise your right hand. Aye. Opposed? Motion's pass. Now, Tammy.
Thank you. There we go. So the next topic is the 2023 tentative public outreach schedule. So we're just going out through February right now. So for January, we're going to start reviewing the existing elements, and that's what we were going to ask you to do through January, is to review the existing elements for input, for any suggestions, anything that you want to see added, and then create some possible survey questions for what you think that needs to be added or what you've heard from the members of the public that they'd like to see in those elements that we have currently. So that's what we were going to ask you to do for January for our meeting there, was to start going through the elements, start taking notes, things that you think that need to be updated, which there's a lot of stuff that needs to be updated, any things that you think that need to be added, and then for anything that needs to be added or corrected, create some possible survey questions that we can reach out to the public to get their input on, because that's very important. We're going to start planning events to participate in. We're thinking 4 to 6 big events a year, things like Earth Day, events on the plaza. We just need to reach out to the Chamber of Commerce and the other groups to see what's going to take for us to get on those agendas. And we're reaching out to our tourism department to see which events they feel we get the better bang for our buck, basically, because sometimes you have to pay to get into these. And this is also going to help us set our budget for this next year. Any community groups that you're part of that you feel that we can go and speak to, please let me know and who to contact so we can get on their agendas, because sometimes we have to go out months in advance. So if you belong to any community groups, HOAs that you feel that we can go out and talk to, educate them, give information to, or even just to give handouts to once we get those created, of where our website is, who to email, where to do the surveys and all that stuff, where everything's going to be updated all the time. We're going to reach out to the Chamber of Commerce to get information there. We're going to reach out to the school district and the colleges. We really want to get in with the school, maybe get in some government classes to do some education. This is part of government, creating a general plan, so we can go and talk to them and have them do surveys too. We want their input. Because as we saw yesterday, if any of you watched the city council meeting, we don't have that much, very many kids staying in the town. So we want to see what would draw them back. You know, if they go off to college, if they stay in the state, what can bring them back to Prescott? What's missing to bring them here, or keep them here? So we want to reach out to the school and the colleges. We're going to also finish the website to post surveys and other information. That's stuff we're working on over the next couple of months. As the city is in the process of updating their website, but we need to get something going sooner than that, because we're hearing next spring. So then in February, we're going to finish putting together the schedule of the events and community meetings, hopefully. We're going to create mailers and banners and such, depending on our budget. Create maps and storyboards for events and meetings. We're finding out the open house type meeting is very much more effective than sitting up and talking to people than have them mill around. The open house concept is working very well through other planning processes, so we're going to use that format. So we need the storyboards and maps and questionnaires. Create the survey questions. We're going to get started on that to get them out hopefully by April. May, to start getting the community input and then finalize actually the larger events. So that's kind of our outreach, at least through February, what we have planning on going forward, and we'll see where we are come February. So through the January meeting, that's what we were going to ask you to do. Review the existing elements, make comments on the existing elements, anything that you see that's missing that we need to address. We know housing is a big issue right now. We do plan on having a housing element. Climate's another one. We have Climates that's doing a climate study right now, and we should be getting that probably mid-November, December. So we'll have that information to use to incorporate into the general plan, and then whatever other information we get out of that. And then we have other studies going on too we hope to incorporate into or have that data. So that's what we were going to ask you to do through January. So that's a lot to do, to go through all the elements, to kind of really digest it, think about it, talk to your neighbors, talk to your friends, what might be missing, what's issues or concerns they have, and try to think of some survey questions to create so that we start getting that going. And we're going to be reaching out to our project team too through the other departments, and we'll use your guys' input and comments and survey questions to add on to. So that's what we were asking for through January.
Tammy, can you send that out to us by email so we have a hard copy of that?
Of the plan?
Yes.
You have a plan in your binder. So a copy of the general plan was given to all of you in your binders, a paper copy. Oh, this presentation?
Yeah.
Okay, sure.
Just so we have a feel for what we're looking at for the next 2 months.
Sure. I'll send out an email that kind of summarizes it.
That's fine.
Yeah.
At the very first meeting of our meetings, I asked for a copy of the last updated open space plan, which is only referred to in the last general plan. It was not included in the general plan.
Because it wasn't something I believe that was adopted by the city.
Well, it was adopted by reference in the last general plan.
Well,
It is. We will find a copy of it.
All right,
It's
thank
not
you.
something that we have readily available.
Thank you.
yeah.
Deborah?
Kind of along the same lines as Rod, there's some ongoing planning. I think there's a study on the Watson Lake area. So can we get at least a list of documents with links that we should be looking at to give us additional guidance, like the CIP, any ongoing studies that the city's undertaking right now?
They haven't started them yet, but we do have members on our project team that are working on those. So we'll be getting that information because part of what we did, we just met with all the directors, and what we said is that you guys have all these planning efforts that you're going to start doing, that we want to collaborate. So give us your information, your questions that you want to reach out, and we'll do that process. Because why have 4 or 5 different processes going on when this kind of collaborates all those different departments and all those different elements? They all partake in our open space, the transportation. So we're going to get all their information and all their questions, and we're going to include it in our surveys and information that we present to the community.
Yeah, I was asking for us to be able to look at if we could get just some links even.
At this time, they haven't started those processes, so they don't have anything yet that from what they've told us.
Okay,
But
I
we
was
will
thinking
reach
like
out-
the-
we will
like the
reach out to the
AVO.
directors.
I mean, I can go out and look for it on the website. That takes a half an hour usually. So I'm thinking of things that are ongoing right now where there's some active documents.
Well, when the AVO is approved, or whatever's approved,
Okay.
then we can get that to you.
Ralph?
Microphone, please, so it's,
George, when you mentioned to Rod that you were going to go ahead and provide the open space plan, were you intending to provide that to all of us or just Rod?
Just Rod.
I would
No,
like
I'm
that
gonna get everything, we're not going to give any one of you anything that everyone else doesn't get.
All right.
That's, general rule is everybody gets everything.
I just wanted that assurance. Thank you.
Not a problem. Including things you may not want, but
George,
if someone asks
thank you.
for them, you're going to get them.
Yeah, thanks.
George, I believe the version I was referring to is 2008 or 2009. I think that's the one that's referred to in the 2015
I
plan.
think you're right, 2009, and I believe that, I think Tammy's right, it wasn't formally adopted by council, but there is a planned version of that out there that I've seen, so we'll find it for you.
and we know that Parks and Rec will be updating the opens, creating their own, so, and that's something we're going to incorporate or just have it part of our element. So it's in 2023 to 2024, so in January 2023, you're going to start reviewing the existing elements for comment and possible survey questions. In July through December 2023, we're going to start evaluating the survey results. So as part of the state statutes and the Growing Smarter legislature, the biggest thing why the statutes was created for general plans, one of the biggest things is public outreach. That's the biggest element, the biggest part of the statutes is all the public outreach, and that's the most important part of the general plan and comprehensive plan planning effort. So July through December, start evaluating the survey results, staff updating the existing elements and start new elements based on the community feedback. August of 2023 through July of 2024 is when you guys are really going to be getting into it and reviewing the updated and new elements, probably 2 a month with the committee to get your final comments and suggestions. And by July 2024, we kind of need to have a final document. Because in 2024, so August to September of 2024 is when we start the 60-day comment period, which is required by state statutes. It's part of the being open and transparent and getting the public comments, because that's the biggest part of all this. It's their document, so they get a comment on it. October 12th of 2024 would be the first Planning and Zoning Commission. It'll be a study session to introduce them to the plan, get them reading it, introduce them to it. October 26th, first public hearing with the Planning and Zoning Commission. Per state statutes, required to have 2 meetings with the Zoning Commission in different locations. So it'll be October 26th and November 9th. As long as November 9th we get a recommendation, then we'll go to December 12th for the first City Council as a study session. December 19th for first public hearing with City Council. And then if we need to, January of 2025, the second public hearing with City Council. We need to get this done by January 2025. So we can get it on the ballot and get everything to the county to start getting it on the ballot. Then that's where we ask you again, since we can't advocate for the plan again, that we need you to go out and represent the plan, get support, comments from the public, so we can include that all in the ballot information.
So is it going on the ballot in August?
August of 2025. That's the goal. So the next thing that was on the agenda, so that kind of went through B and C together. We did have a question, again, about the enforceability of the general plan. So the Growing Smarter legislation was passed in 1998, and the Growing Smarter Plus was in 2000. That's about when all the cities and towns and counties throughout the state that didn't have a general plan started their general plan processes or comprehensive plan processes, was at that time. So the purpose of the Growing Smarter legislation was to assist communities in developing strategies for dealing with growth. That's when we started to see a lot of growth, was in the late 90s, early 2000s. And then implementing the measure would lead to better planned growth and would protect the state's cultural and natural resources from unmanaged sprawl. So that's the whole idea of having a general plan or comprehensive plan, is to have planned growth. So planning document. The most important part of that plan is the land use map. So the land use map will designate what type of commercial, residential, where all that will go within the city, using the existing zoning map we have now, and then we add to it where are areas that we see growth going to happen, and what kind of uses do we see in those areas. And then now when new projects come in, rezonings or annexations come in, we look at that map. Is it in compliance with it? If it's designated as residential and they want to do commercial, they have to amend that map. So part of that general plan criteria from the Growing Smarter legislature was the 3 key things that came out of that. Was it's increased the required level of public participation in the development, approval, and amendment of the general plan. So any amendments to the general plan is a public hearing process. So but mostly was the public participation in creating and approval of the general plans or the comprehensive plans. It also increases the scope of a general plan by requiring new growth-related elements and detailing aspects of those elements. So in state statutes and the Growing Smarter legislation, it said these are the elements you have to have based on your population. So if you're under 50,000, these are the elements you have to have. If you're over 50,000, you have to have these additional elements. That's what it spelled out. You can have more elements, you just can't have less. The third thing it did is it strengthens the implementation power of the general plan by requiring that future rezoning comply with the plan and that major amendments be presented at an annual public hearing and receive 2/3 approval by the governing body. So it gave us the flexibility to say this is what's going to trigger a major general plan amendment. And then those are only done once a year, usually at the end of the year, and it requires 2/3 approval. So you can have 1, you can have 10, depends on how much your city's growing and changing. So if it doesn't trigger that major plan, then it's a minor amendment and can be done anytime throughout the year. Yes?
Is the city forecasting when they will hit that 50,000 threshold? Because we know it will happen during the timeframe of the next general plan. And if it happens during that next 10 years, do we need to account for that in this planning? Or do we wait till the next plan to address, because we've now passed that threshold?
We are already anticipating that. We are anticipating to hit that 50,000 during the next 10 years. So we are already, some of the required elements for over 50,000, we already have. They're kind of embedded in other elements. So we're going to pull them out and we're going to create the additional elements. We've already anticipated that and had planned for that.
Tammy, what's the date, timeline on this slide? When were these 3 points brought up?
2000.
2000.
So the biggest thing is public participation. That's the biggest thing that came out of it, was to get public comment. It's the citizens' plan. They need to participate. They need to give and to be part of it and give comment. But they also approve it. So it's all through public hearing processes and through the election. Then this is what's required in the general plan. These are the elements. And then what triggers, it gave it that you have to have a process for a major plan amendment, but it gave the flexibility to the jurisdictions to say this is what will trigger it. And it's in the back of the general plan on one of the last pages in your general plan.
And the governing body is who?
The city council.
So when the 2015 plan was drawn up, there were the couple optional areas, elements that were looked at. Are those the ones that are required if your population goes over 50,000, or are there more than that even?
More than that,
Yeah, way more than that.
yeah.
So, Tammy,
Yes.
I'm glad that you introduced earlier an element that you would like to see or should be in a general plan, and that's climate change. At this time, if people don't mind, I would like to introduce a person who I think should be representing that, Patrick Grady, who's the director for the Climate Change Coalition, and I think he should be an integral part of that discussion when that comes up.
He is, and he's part of Climus, and we are part of that that evaluation that's going on right now. So when we get the final, because I'm part of that too, when we get that final study, then we will be bringing that to you to
Great.
provide that as information to you to see it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. So that kind of explains about the general plan. It's a guide, except for the land use map. That's the most important part of the general plan, is the land use map. The rest are goals and how to possibly implement those goals. So that's kind of what we get out of that plan. But the land use map is the most enforceable part, because if someone brings forward a rezoning or an annexation that does not comply with that, then they have to amend the general plan. So it's always amendable. It's mainly through a public hearing process, but we try to stick to that as much as possible.
Through a public process.
Through a public process. Any rezoning or change does go through a public process, always. It's a legislative act. Okay. Are there any other questions about the general plan?
Thank you, Tammy, for putting this back on the agenda. My request, maybe others made the request as well. The reason I asked about the enforceability is there have been lots of people who are concerned about the fact that the general plan is often referenced as a guideline when it wishes to be circumvented. And so the mayor's raised this issue, others have raised this issue. How do we make it more enforceable? And I'm glad the city attorney's here, because the reason I wanted this on the agenda today is what can we do to make it more enforceable? I noticed when I reviewed, unfortunately, I didn't make it to the last meeting. I wasn't able to attend the last meeting. But Mr. Schneidman had made the comment that even though the general plan is required by statute to be renewed or updated, or a new complete general plan every 10 years, he said you don't have to wait 10 years. You can do it within 5 years. And if you did do it within 5 years, it would have to go to the voters to have it approved. So I'm not suggesting that this is what we do, but I want to throw this out for possible discussion. If the major amendments require a public hearing and a supermajority. What's that, 5 votes on the city council? Is it 6?
6, I believe,
Okay.
yes.
And, but they can do that and make a major amendment to a plan that was required to be approved by the voters. So does the statute restrict us from making the plan more enforceable? Can we, for instance, say any major amendment to our plan, it has to go to the voters so that they approve it? Or we might not want to do that. That's why I'm saying I'm putting this out for discussion. But I'd like to get creative and have the opportunity to look at different options to make it more enforceable, since many members of the community and elected officials, I've heard many complaints about the fact that the general plan is often referenced as a guideline when the desire is to circumvent it.
Before we continue, why don't we get a definition of what a major amendment is?
That was one of the 2 things I was going to talk about in response to Mr. Hess's question. There are 2 ways that some communities have used to make the plan more enforceable. One is to adopt an implementation plan with it that would go to council with the plan that actually has timelines or timeframes or priorities for certain things to be done. We've talked about it with both the 2003 plan and the 2015 plan, and in both cases, council didn't follow up on the proposal to develop such a implementation plan. This committee, with staff's help, could develop an implementation plan to give to council with the general plan for adoption, and that sets some timeframes. As far as legally being able to hold council to recommendations that are in the general plan, you probably can't, but politically you can. Council should be using the document provided to them by the voters and residents of Prescott as a guideline for all of their decision-making. And if they don't follow it, there should be repercussions for not following it. The other thing that can be done is mentioned a moment ago about what is a major general plan amendment. That major amendment is a definition adopted by City Council through a separate action. It's a resolution that could be sent back to them, again, with proposed modifications at the time the plan goes to them for action, that could change the parameters. The parameters were set in 2001 or 2 and didn't change with the last general plan updates. So the parameters for what is a major amendment are 21 years old. And maybe that needs to be reviewed as part of this process and changes made to a recommendation to council to modify that resolution. That's another
George,
way to do it.
While you're there, the last general plan, this was really discussed, as you know, and Elizabeth Ruffner stood up and said, we need more teeth in this. And so out of that came, and the attorneys here like a legal definition, the council under Marlin adopted immediately that it would be a strategic plan. I'd like a definition or a defining of the difference between that. Is that what we really want to be aiming at? Does that have teeth? Or are we looking at something much more involved? Because I thought the last general plan, we really were frustrated and said, okay, then the solution is a strategic plan. And that was approved by council.
And your committee at that time recommended a follow-up plan, a strategic implementation plan, the plan I'm talking about today, with guidelines and timeframes, and that didn't occur. But it didn't come from your committee. A recommendation to do it subsequent to your vote was what you submitted to council, and that didn't happen afterwards. I certainly will defer to Joe, but from a legal standpoint, there's no difference between a strategic plan and a general plan as far as enforceability. Unless something is adopted by ordinance and made part of a code, you don't have the legal backing to say, oh, you can't do that. And even then, there's always the option to amend the code that could be adopted by a subsequent council. These documents are flexible because at any point in the future, a change in council could result in a change in the implementation of codes. That's how our government works.
I heard just a few minutes ago that a supermajority of council can amend the general plan?
That's correct.
And
So-
yet, I'm reading in item 1 up here that public participation is required in the development approval and
And
amendment.
That is correct.
So how does a supermajority of council become public participation?
It's required to be done at a public hearing. Notification is published.
Okay.
The public's given an opportunity to come in and give their opinion to council before any action is taken.
So it's
the public's involved in the process, so it meets the item number 1. But the supermajority is a very high-level trigger for council action. It's not something that's taken lightly.
Yeah, I recognize that, but you're saying there's a notification, other than just the council's agenda being published?
There's usually a publication required in the newspaper, which most
Okay.
people don't read, and a publication on the city's website prior to the
Much.
meeting. So we put an effort to get the information out, but honestly, if you're not looking for the information in the public,
Yeah.
you might not see it. So that is something that is built into the system. The supermajority requirement applies to other things as well, and the public hearing requirement applies to other things as well. But honestly, the citizens need to keep an eye on what's going on. And we'll make it as easy as possible to participate, but you're right, that could happen.
Rob?
Yeah, I think the substance of what I'm really asking is, I expect that the city is not able to be more lenient than the Arizona statute with regard to its laws regarding the general plan. But is the city able to be more restrictive than the state statutes? And if in doing so, as you mentioned, could we change, or could we make code provisions or charter provisions that give the protection of the general plan that seems to be pretty widespread a concern? So,
And my opinion on that is that this commission cannot be any more or less restrictive than statute, but can, and I think George kind of hinted at that, recommend along with the general plan an implementation provision that, including code rewrites, that could be adopted along with it. And I think that there's a lot of political pressure, given that a vote just occurred on the general plan, that goes along with it, that if a council sees that at the same time, they're more likely to adopt the implementation plan. Another council years later is not likely to do that. So in terms of just changing code through the process and some of the other things, no, we can't do that. But it can be a recommendation along with the process. And given the time frame and the vote and all that, council is much more likely to adopt those as well along with it.
and you would be the one, or your department would be the one that assists us in developing the code language that would be effective in that regard.
That's right. And we're willing to lend that support. I mean, that's why I'm here at this point, so. And then I was going to mention, just as terms of public participation and public hearing, and some of you, or maybe all of you know, but public hearing is a defined term. It's a specific defined term, and it's different than public meeting, which requires additional notice provisions that from public meetings and requires public participation in a way that public meetings don't. So that's how the public participation is met in this.
Okay,
And
thanks.
so any amendment to the general plan that is considered a major general plan amendment has to go through the same process, kind of the same public hearing type process as the adoption of the general plan. In state statutes, it says when the general plan or any major amendment is being adopted, planning commissions and municipalities with populations of more than 25,000 persons shall hold 2 or more public hearings at different locations within the municipality to promote citizen participation. Notice of the time and place of a hearing and availability of studies and summaries related to the hearing shall be given at least 15 and not more than 30 calendar calendar days before the hearing by publication in the paper and any other means we feel necessary. There's a lot of information they have to submit for a general plan amendment, a major amendment, and we would have all that available to the public upon asking for it. So as part of the public participation process.
Ted?
A couple things. I wholeheartedly agree with that effort. I've brought that up before in planning commission meetings. I don't think we're going to solve that today, but I'd like to move a little bit from the theoretical to the practical. For example, there was a case where the planning commission voted unanimously for a project, and the city council then overturned that. There's been many times where we've had split decisions that were never overturned. So what we did to try to address that is if a planning commission issue comes in front of the city council, that a member of the planning commission will be present to answer any questions. We could do the same with that. But to get again from the theoretical to the practical, George, I have a question. These 3 bullet points. And I'll use an example that's near and dear to Don and my heart. When it came time, we had a general plan in 2015. Joe, you, me have said if we stayed with the 2015 plan, we wouldn't have the AVO issue at the airport. When it came before City Council in 2017, did it have a public hearing, and did we have a 2/3 approval of the City Council?
No, for the specific reason that it was determined that the 2017 plan that was adopted for that particular development, which I refuse to name because it'll just cause nightmares, didn't amend the general plan. That in general policy reviewing it, there was no amendment to the plan itself. And because of that, it never came into the situation where we had to trigger a major plan amendment. Please, like, again, Tammy pointed out to you, you have major plan amendment definition in the back of the general plan book. It is hard to trigger a major general plan amendment. Most general plan amendments are a single parcel, they're in a particular area, someone's trying to rezone and they need to amend the plan to match. It's a relatively minor process. It never triggers that 2/3, nor does it trigger the annual public hearing. That annual public hearing and 2/3 vote are 2 very onerous things intended to dissuade cities from making major amendments to their plan. It has to be a pretty big deal for you to go and change something that the voters just approved, or even if they approved it 9 years ago. So that part makes it hard. The trigger for that, though, is within the control of the city. You can make it easy to trigger with smaller developments, or you can leave it as hard to trigger, mostly with large developments. And that's what was chosen, again, in 2001 or 2002. So at that time, it was determined by council that the trigger would be a pretty high bar. You could do a lot before you got up here and had to go through that process.
Well, as I opened with, we're not going to solve this today, but I think that's an issue that we need to concentrate on in the first portion of our efforts here. To Joe's point, to stay in concert with the laws. But there are other issues like communication and attendance at the city council meeting where we can better protect whatever general plan we come up with. Thank you.
So we will propose to you that all of you guarantee to be at council meetings for the next 10 years. To respond to that. Actually, it makes sense to have someone who can speak to the general plan. We try to do it from planning staff, but we do it in our staff report, and it's not always as explicit as we could make it. And maybe that's something that comes out of this process, that we have a reminder requirement, a task that planning staff has to remind council of items that affect the general plan when we bring them to them, like a rezoning, for instance.
Another thing we've been discussing too is that part of it was in the implementation part of it was that to have yearly meetings. I know with the county, we had 2 joint sessions a year with the Planning and Zoning Commission and the Board of Supervisors. And at those meetings, we would give an update of how we're implementing the general plan. And that's something we've been talking about. We started that this last year, having 1 meeting. So if we have 1 meeting or 2 a year, and we've also been looking at other jurisdictions who have recently, and things that they're doing. There was one in North Carolina that on their website, they have every quarter, they have a flyer or a newsletter that goes out. This is what we've done to implement the plan. This is the street projects that came out of the plan we've done. This is what we've done for this. This is what we've done for this element. This is what we've done for this. And that's something we are looking at with the creation of the website, is that having those functions where on the website, we can say, these are things that we've done to implement the plan. So we are being accountable as a city to show the public and the citizens on our website and in writing what we've done to implement the plan.
And one of the ways to do that, again, is an implementation plan recommended by this group to the city council at the time that you recommend the revised general plan. And then that can be used for the score sheet, so that quarterly or annually we have an update, and we can say, here's what's been done.
Deborah?
Oh, Mr. Moore was first, I think. I had just a quick question on the implementation plan. So I noticed I had pointed out last time that the general plan had called for a transportation study to be done, not something by Simcoe, but for the city to do one, and it wasn't done. So if we were to say we think there should be a specific area plan for whatever, or a conservation plan would the implementation plan then help hold accountable those things in the general plan? Is that what you're suggesting?
I think it would, because in effect, we would go every quarter or every 6 months to the public through some form, whether it's on the website or a presentation to council and planning commission, and say, here's what we've done. Well, that also implies what we haven't done.
Right.
And if we have a plan, an implementation plan that actually lists out expected outcomes, you can track it. You can use it as a score sheet. How are we doing?
Councilmember Moore?
So I have a question, I think, for George. It sounded like at the last general plan, there was a desire to have an implementation plan, but the council didn't adopt it. So my question is, even if this commission recommends an implementation plan, is this council bound to adopt the implementation plan or only bound to adopt the general plan? And how can we put more enforceability in that? Because what good is a general plan without enforceability? So can we enforce the council to have to adopt the implementation plan as well as the general plan?
Legally, we can't require the implementation plan be adopted by council. Bundling it together with the recommendation for the general plan certainly makes a good case for it being adopted. Another method that might help with that would be to reference an implementation plan throughout the general plan, with the idea being that we're going to provide an opportunity for council to adopt it. But council has a lot of leeway by our system of government, a lot of leeway as to what they adopt and don't adopt, and what they enforce and what they don't enforce. If council were to adopt an implementation plan, it could be unadopted or modified by future councils. You have to know that. But if it's in place and it's being used and it's functional, the likelihood of that changing over time goes down significantly, especially if we can show that we're implementing the recommendations of the general plan on a regular basis, as Tammy noted, through a score sheet or a report card that gets issued regularly. Council's going to see that as an opportunity to show the public that they are doing what's in the general plan. It can be a very positive thing for council.
Oh, me? George, was the implementation plan that was requested by the 2015 General Plan Committee ever drafted? Was there anything ever drafted by anyone?
It was a recommendation to create a plan.
Okay,
So
but-
again, without having something attached to it, it was easy to just say, we think you should do this, and without having the bones to build on, it didn't happen.
All right, so there was nothing, no outlines, nothing.
No, there was nothing for council to immediately adopt.
Ted?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, we could be on the verge of boiling the ocean here, because I think this is going to take some meetings to get through, to get to something that's manageable. But I think people struggle with the idea that this would go to the vote of the citizens and be the product of 11 people over a period of 3 years, and then summarily be overturned in a weekly meeting at a city council. I'm not talking about mandates, but I think there's we can, as part of this effort, come up with a communication process that addresses that, so that we're not getting arbitrary decisions here. We're getting decisions based on facts. And that may be, like we do in the Planning Commission now, send a planning or a general plan person to the city. It may be part of the implementation plan, or the members of the general plan may have longer legs as the plan is unfolded and stay as part of a ad hoc group that reports to the city council for the specific purpose of not overriding a plan that the citizens of this fair city have voted for.
I think one important thing to keep in mind, at least through the process, sorry about my voice, it's coming and going, at least through the process of getting in front of council with a plan to approve, so something that they can vote on to send to the voters at that point, is that we're going to keep all of you involved in it. It's not going to be the planning staff who goes to council and says, here's the proposal from the committee. It's going to be planning staff and you standing in front of council saying, here's the proposal from the committee. Again, that gives a lot of extra impetus to follow through on it. The citizens of Prescott and your bodies have participated in that process. The other very important part is, I hate to keep saying it over and over again, Tammy's doing the same thing, we're saying it over and over again, public participation. The more public participation you have, the more pressure to follow the plan. The more we reach out to the public and get them involved in the process so that we know that what's going to council is the plan the public wants, the more council is going to feel pressure to follow that plan. And I apologize, I don't want it to sound like I'm talking about council just willy-nilly ignoring things. Things change over time. Priorities change over time. That happens. The issue for council, though, is they're also representing the public of Prescott. And if you can bring them a plan that is supported by a large group of the population of Prescott, they're going to be far more likely to follow through on it. And that's another reason why we typically use committees like this when we do general plans here. The last 3 general plans have had a committee of some form to participate in it. Most of our neighbors don't. They hire a consultant to replace you, and the consultant works with us in the planning department to come up with a plan. And I don't think it's the representative of the community as well as we get when we use a committee like this.
Gary?
So I want to address that through a question that Ted asked me meetings ago. What was my frustration with the 2015 plan? We're talking about it. I think the only committee or subcommittee was the one that the late George Sheets and I formed for the open space trails, which we met for months. We had up to 32 people. And that plan was implemented in 6 years rather than 10. But it was adopted into the general plan. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, was that the only committee plan that was brought forth and adopted?
I believe you're right.
And that's shameful. And I know that it was also adopted because it was so well constructed by Prescott Valley. And I think the challenge for this committee, and I'm going back to the 2011, that we need to decide the nature and the content of the general plan among us as well, form our subcommittees, involve the general public with that. Otherwise, we're going to have the same results as the 215. Nothing worked. I don't want to go through 3 more years of that. I've sat down and done a dozen outlines. I already have a survey for the public that would take 2 minutes to do and for this committee. Simplest in the world. I've used it for 40 years. I'm anxious to move forward. I could skip November, December, but I want to start and see this committee work forward rather than sit here month after month and go through what are we supposed to do. I think there's a huge intelligence sitting here that's already ready to move forward, and I'd like to.
We agree. We don't want to hold back the input we get from the committee, but we needed to be prepared. And as you know, there are sometimes personnel changes that also affect policies and procedures. Some of that has affected this. I've been involved in 3 of these here and about to be a 4th one, this one, and 2 in other places in the country. I think we need to follow a process that gets you involved as soon as possible and that gets your input back to us as soon as possible. But I also recall from those previous ones that the first thing we have to do is to determine what's good in the current plan and what needs to be looked at. And that's the first step that we're going to ask you to do, because that's the most important part. You have to have a foundation to start before you start developing new sections of the plan. And the foundation is the plan you already have in place, the 2015 plan.
Do we have any more slides to look at?
So
We have a
next-
blank one.
Well, the public comment that was added to be added to it. So we were going to open it up to our public comment, if anyone wanted to comment.
Well, I have a question concerning that. Though those people who are Zooming, are they allowed, the public allowed to have open discussion? Because I've had 3 people ask me that. Okay, thank you.
So I believe come January, we're still discussing whether Zoom will be an option for the public to participate.
We may or may not have an alternative to that. It may require actual physical participation. We're working on that at the moment.
Is now an opportunity for public?
Yes. We'll open it up to the public. We will need to have your name and address, sir.
My name is Rich Kaplan.
Could you pull the microphone down?
Short guy. My name is Rich Kaplan. I'm a 12-year resident of Yavapai Hills with my wife. It's 840 Flying U Court in Prescott. I came to this meeting or hearing, I'm not sure which it is, but I was interested in getting a better understanding of this process, and I can see we're well represented with the people on this committee. I wanted to move a little into the more practical and shift from the theoretical, because there's an important issue that's facing Prescott, in particular Yavapai Hills, and that is the issue of the Sundog Connector, which is a new highway that's being proposed, and there's currently SIMPO is studying that process at the moment. I thought it was interesting that one of you mentioned that this is supposed to be the general plan for Prescott, or the general plan of this committee, as opposed to somebody else's plan. And SIMPO is relying on the general plan that's come out of Prescott over the years to justify, in part, the Sundog corridor. And so they like to say that it's been through this committee, and general plans that go back to the 1990s have all referenced the Sundog Connector. I haven't been through all of them, but I went through the 2015 plan, and there's all of about 2 sentences that reference the Sundog Connector. And so I think you have a responsibility to look at the Sundog Connector from the standpoint of Prescott. SIMPO has a much broader jurisdiction, and there are other municipalities that are involved, including Prescott Valley. And unfortunately, the Sundog corridor, the Sundog Connector, is an issue that the impact is going to be felt by Prescott, not Prescott Valley. Prescott Valley is in favor of Prescott sticking a road in the backyard of Yavapai Hills. I don't know if Yavapai Hills and Prescott feel the same way. Prescott is the community that will see, feel, hear, and touch this new highway if it's built. And because of where Glassford Hill sits, Prescott Valley won't see it at all, basically. So I think it's an important issue. There was a reference made to subcommittees. I was trying to find out what the process is to get something removed from the general plan. I mean, I went through, your last general plan is over 100 pages long. There's only a couple references to Sundog. I think it's pages 1254 and 115. And I don't think SIMPO should have a basis to rely on a sentence that was basically stuck in this plan to report what SIMPO is evaluating as if it's the general plan of Prescott. I think Prescott needs to look at that plan itself. I heard reference to there's a subcommittee, or maybe perhaps subcommittees are being formed to address issues. I would encourage you to think about whether the Sundog Connector should have a subcommittee as part of this general planning process. I can tell you that I am on a committee in Yavapai Hills. Yavapai Hills is probably one of the largest communities in Prescott. There's over 1,100 households. There is a committee that was appointed by the Board of Directors for Yavapai Hills. Some of you may have seen at Yavapai Hills, the board and the committee commissioned a survey of Yavapai Hills residents, which came down strongly opposed to this new project. And that was submitted to a number of leaders in the area, including the paper. There's also Save the Dells just came out, I think, in the last week or two, with a strong opposition to the Sundog Connector. It's not just a Yavapai Hills issue, it's a Prescott issue. And so I would encourage you to take a look at this. SIMPO is trying to rely on your plan, which basically just reports, I think administratively, that SIMPO was studying Sundog, and all of a sudden that gets ballooned to the top of the mountain as if Sundog should be built. And I don't think you've all had an opportunity to look at that issue yourself. So I don't want to take up much of your time, but there's a lot of opposition to this. The Yavapai Hills Board of Directors is opposed to it. Save the Dells is opposed to it. There's a Sundog Disconnect group that was formed on Facebook that is opposed to this. And your jurisdiction is broader than SIMPO. SIMPO's in the business, I think, of basically building roads. You have a responsibility to look at the quality of life for all the citizens of Prescott. I heard a lot of comment about this is the citizens' plan about public outreach, so I'm here as a member of the public. And I believe in your general plans in the past, there's a lot of talk about the quality of life. You're focused on a much broader context than just the issue of what a road might do. And I think it's fair to say that if this road gets built in the backyard of Yavapai Hills, it's going to wreak havoc on the quality of life in Yavapai Hills. And I know this thing has been sitting around since the 1990s, and these things take time. But the circumstances in Prescott have changed, and to destroy Glassford Hill by sticking up a major highway that all the residents of Yavapai Hills are going to see and nobody in Prescott Valley is going to see is going to cause serious detriment to this community. So I thank you for listening to me.
I have a question.
Thank you for your input.
I have a question.
Ralph?
Would you repeat the page numbers that you
Sure.
referenced?
It's pages 12 and 54, and then there's a map on page 115. And it's the 2015 plan. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good afternoon. I'm Patrick Grady, that Gary referred to. So I'm the 943 West Rosser Street. I've lived here since 2017. I'm the board president of the Yavapai Climate Change Coalition, and I was the chairperson of the Protect Steering Committee that ultimately brought to City Council for authorization to move forward on a Quad Cities climate risk assessment, which they did this past May, 7-0. So we're deeply appreciative of the mayor and City Council for that. So that's who I am, and I'm here today just to comment on some of the elements that are perhaps missing from the plan, and wanted to propose that the committee take a close look at an energy element. So, for example, Flagstaff has an energy element in their general plan. The most recent draft approved by their citizen body of the Yavapai County 2032 comprehensive plan included an energy element. And I'm just going to read a couple of really quick things. The Yavapai, from their plan, that's out for 60-day comment currently. The Yavapai County energy element is an important component of the comprehensive plan. By developing a comprehensive energy strategy now, the county can be prepared to shape sustainable growth over the next 10 years. Through the energy element, the county can encourage the efficient use of energy and promote clean, renewable energy production. good energy policies can also provide economic and environmental benefits for county residents. So I would encourage you to take a look at that. I know that's a voluntary element. It's not a mandatory element for a community our size. But I know you're looking at affordable housing or workforce housing, and I think this would blend well with the work that we're doing on the Quad Cities climate risk assessment in collaboration with City Council and CLIMAS out of the U of A.
Mr. Chair, just a point of clarification. You began this discussion of the energy element talking about Flagstaff, and then you referenced Yavapai County.
Yes.
They're not one and the same, are they?
No, they are not. So I mean, both of those communities have that element in their general plan or comprehensive plan, and I'm quoting from the draft plan of Yavapai County.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
And we have hold on.
Anybody on Zoom?
Bonnie McMinn.
Oh.
You're allowed to talk if you unmute yourself.
Hello, my name is Bonnie McMinn, and I live at 954 Broken Branch. And I want to first of all thank the entire committee for your commitment to this very, very important and strategic plan. One of the members had mentioned the transportation plan, so I want to kind of dovetail on that comment, and also in support of Mr. Kaplan's comments a few minutes ago. I think the city has to have a transportation plan as an element of the general plan. As everyone has pointed out, SIMPO is relying on the work that the city of Prescott is doing. Sundog Connector has somehow risen to the top, which is very unfortunate, especially because there's been such talk about Highway 69 being expanded. And that needs to be, of course, part of the global, if you will, transportation plan. But then the other question is, what other road projects is the city looking at that could have an impact on all of this, whether it's affecting quality of life, enhancing or detracting from transportation, because building a bigger road doesn't necessarily reduce traffic. A bigger road actually increases traffic. So I would just encourage and support all the work that you will be able to do in writing and determining this very, very important transportation plan as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments.
Is there anyone else on Zoom? Sandy, do you? Okay. Okay, Sandy, you can unmute yourself.
I'm Sandy Stute. I live at 4976 Cactus Place in the Yavapai Hills. I'm a retired public transportation professional, 30 years in the business, and have worked in this area with Yavapai Regional Transit in Chino Valley, and have been working with SIMPO for the last 6 or 7 years regarding establishing a regional transportation system. I'm passionate about it, and so I would encourage you to consider that transportation is more than roads. And with the fact that Prescott Valley was able to obtain funding to begin a microtransit system for their city, which unfortunately stops at the border of their community, it should be something that this committee would want to look at in terms of increasing transportation options to the residents of Prescott as well. So if you're looking for things to talk about or elements for the plan, and I strongly support finding a way to hold implementation efforts to a higher level of accountability, you'll be hearing from me from time to time. I am the bus lady. And so I thank you for your time at this point.
Thank you for your input.
Thank you, Sandy. And that's all we have on Zoom.
Okay.
So our next meeting was for Wednesday, January 25th, and I'll send out a reminder email of what we're going to be asking for you for that meeting to bring with you. Any survey questions you have, any comments you have about the existing elements. And I'll also send out the elements that have been brought up at this meeting to try to think about, if you think about any questions, like survey questions, how we can reach out to the community and get their input on them. So I'll send you guys an email in the next couple of weeks in regards to that.
Tammy, you said January 25th,
Yes.
2 o'clock again, huh?
Yes.
Okay.
So the goal is that our meetings for 2023, the last Wednesday of the month seems to be working pretty well at 2 o'clock. So we have this room reserved for every last Wednesday of the month at 2 o'clock and from January on. So.
Deborah, do you have something?
Yeah, we had talked about trying to get a meeting scheduled. And I want to address that, George, because I know how much work it is from a staff perspective. I think it would make sense to do it after the council acts on November 8th. We could do it the first week in December to kind of sandwich between New Year, Christmas and Thanksgiving. But I want to stress, at least from my perspective, we want to collaborate with you. We're not expecting you to come here and give us information every time. We want to be able to have some discussions like we had today. So if that's what's holding back the scheduling of the meeting, maybe that idea helps a little bit.
We will endeavor to do that, and we do want
Think about taking
collaboration and input from you. That's the reason we do this. This is the reason Prescott doesn't hire a consultant. We have a committee who represents the people who live here. We have far better input through this process. So we don't want to fight. We don't want to have you sit around doing nothing. We want productive meetings and we want productive input from you. And again, the first thing we're going to stress is to try to get information back on what's good in the current plan and what do we really need to focus on for the future plan. We're going to bring you some things like the discussion earlier about implementing the 50,000 population requirements that statutes will trigger. From the planner side of it, Tammy and I have talked about it. We think you should proceed as if we were at 50,000 with the elements that are required of population 50,000 cities in the meantime, and not wait and try and amend the plan later. That is more work. It's going to be more things for you to do. It means reviewing concepts for elements that we don't have now, so it'll be new for us as well as for you. But until we've evaluated the current plan, we really don't have a baseline to work from. So that is the first thing we're going to ask of you.
And that's why we're kind of asking for January, was that gives you guys time to send us information, us to get it all together and to get it out to you for the January meeting. So as you guys send us your comments on the different elements, we'll start getting all that together and putting it in a form where we can send it out to you. You can see what everybody's comments are, everyone's suggestions are, and then in January we could have a really good dialogue about that. And then we'll have also the website hopefully up and running, and we'll have other stuff to start showing you as we start moving forward and getting this started.
Councilmember Moore?
Thank you, Don. I think if I could just make a comment from what I've observed with the committee today, there are a lot of people in the committee that would like to get going sooner and faster. And I understand that you want to wait till the 25th, but I think what would be helpful is maybe to give them a deadline, say, we want your comments by January 2nd or something, so that you can compile all of that, because you haven't mentioned the deadline of when you want to hear back from all of them. So that gives them a deadline to put a little pressure on them to get read through the whole current general plan, get that baseline, understand what's good and what's lacking and missing, and that would give them time to work.
And that'll be sent in an email later. Yes.
Okay. Any final comments? Jim?
Well, I just would like to know, should comments go to you as a clearinghouse and you'll send it to the, okay.
Yep, you send it to me and we'll start getting on a spreadsheet and get it all together.
That may be one of the things that we bring back to you at the interim meeting before January is, how do we actually do that? Do we take your comments and create a matrix of, these are Deb's comments, these are Jim's comments, these are James's comments, and then provide that matrix to you, or do you want to actually be able to exchange red lines, which we've done in the past and has been very difficult to keep track of?
Yeah.
Some of those practicalities we can discuss at the next meeting.
James?
Where's listed the additional elements that are required for cities of population over 50,000. Where can I get information about that?
We actually included it in information we've provided for the last meetings. It's actually, I think, in your binder. Yeah.
In case you haven't memorized it, it's Arizona Revised Statutes 9-471.0.
But we included all that in your binders, that these are the existing elements and these are required for additional 50,000. And we can send that information email it to you if you don't have it again.
Is this it?
Oh, it's on there.
You may want to do that.
We can send you
Yeah.
the actual cut from the Arizona Revised Statute, so it spells out what those requirements are, and not just a list of them.
And it actually explains what needs to be in that element.
Ralph?
I think one of the concerns I have, and might be shared by the others, is when we have a long period in between meetings, we're bound by the open meeting law. So even though each of us individually will be sending you ideas, the only time we're able to discuss it among ourselves is in a meeting, because we're precluded under the open meeting law from discussing it with each other between now and January 25th.
Or in a smaller group. We
Well,
can
you
do it
can't-
in a smaller
so
group.
You can't create a subcommittee without staff being involved, because they are open meetings still.
So you could have smaller groups, but they have to be scheduled meetings, they have to be in a location that we would provide staff support for.
Unnecessary ad hoc.
Not in someone's living room.
Uh-oh, right behind you.
That's true as to subcommittees, but open meeting law applies to a majority or a quorum.
Yes,
So
a
if there's
quorum.
2 or 3 of you that happen to be speaking about it, that's fine. It's the formation of subcommittees that require staff.
That's what I meant. That I didn't mean a formal smaller group. I meant that any gathering of less than a quorum is not
doesn't
a
implicate-
violation of the open meeting law.
We just suggest being very careful with that.
So I need more clarification on that. Sorry, Mr. Chairman. The last committee, the last general plan, George and I formed the Trails Open Space Subcommittee. I don't remember any staff members ever attending that. We met for probably 6 months. And we were never told we violated anything, and that was adopted by council.
Yeah, and I don't want to say anything about what happened then, but I'll just say the general rule, and as we relate to the rule of law, is that committees are, the open meeting law applies to committees and to subcommittees. So open meeting law remains something that you have to keep in mind.
So how many people are you talking about would be a violation, over what amount?
Any size subcommittee that is a formally established subcommittee of a committee that to which the open meeting law applies.
And what defines formal versus informal?
Well, if 2 of you want to meet and discuss after this and kind of discuss some ideas that you might have, that is not a formal committee. That doesn't implicate the open meeting law. But where the line draws onto formal and informal, it's not a black line rule or black letter law. So it just depends. But I guess the real answer is, to the extent you talk with one another and you have less than a quorum, that is fine under the open meeting law, though we always recommend to be careful, because you then get into the situation of daisy chaining. You speak with a couple of people and then speak with a couple more people. So we just recommend to be careful. Having said that, it'll happen. You don't need to be paranoid about running into someone at the grocery store and discussing these proceedings. You can do that. But avoiding daisy chaining is something you need to do.
Ralph?
I'll be there on Tuesday at 7:30.
Yeah, and Mr. Young?
Yes.
In addition to the subcommittee meetings, or when the subcommittee meetings are subject to the open meeting law, that means they also have to be noticed in accordance with that.
Yes.
So it's not just a matter of how many are getting together. It's also the fact that you have to comply with the notice requirement.
Any other final comments?
We'll look at the calendar to see if there's something available in early December, the room available, and what we could put together for you, and what kind of comments we've gotten from you.
Thank you.
But we'll send an email out in the next day or 2.
Okay. Any last comment, George?
Last comment is thank you. We really appreciate the volunteering to do this. It's a long process. It's going to take some patience. You're going to not like us some of the time, and we're not going to like you some of the time. But ultimately, we end up with a very good document at the end, and we have for the last 2 general plans. So thank you.
The committee?
Need a gavel?
No. Got a pen. Committee adjourned.